and welcome to the Good Art Friends, where good friends discuss good art. Jonathan, my good friend, how are you doing on this fine March evening?
I'm good. We are approaching the culmination, the verging point of my two favorite seasons, which are summer and baseball. And baseball's
Mm,
now.
yeah. Yankees are laying a whooping on the Giants as we record.
Yeah.
Yeah, baseball season. Uh, what else is good?
Man, I've been listening to so much music as always.
Mhm,
I texted you about this. I finally dove into listening to the first Origami Angel album titled
mhm.
Somewhere City. Um, and I texted you and I'm like, this is my new It's Gonna Be Okay, Feel Okay album because it's very
Yep,
much like
yep.
an emo sound, but it has like a hopeful feeling to it. Somewhere City, the place you can go if you don't feel you fit in anywhere else. You don't have to do anything or be anyone, just follow the road, right? And knowing that like you have so much power, you're an amazing person, that kind of thing. And it's just like, yeah, this feels good. I love the music. Yeah, shout out to Origami Angel, which is literally just a guitarist and a drummer when they perform live, and it's pretty
Oh,
cool.
White Stripes-esque. I like
Yeah.
it. But without the undertones of incest. Hopefully, I assume. I'm not as familiar with their
No, but a bunch of weird open tunings because like, if you don't have a bassist, you gotta make things fill in. So yeah,
That's
pretty
fine.
cool.
That's fine. Yeah, my what's good for this month is I've been reading Super Nintendo by Keza McDonald, which
Hmm.
is cool. So it's like a history of Nintendo told through some of the key series. So there's a chapter on Mario and talking about some of those developments. Now, a chapter on Zelda, on Metroid, on like Pikmin, a number of the key games. I think like Wii Sports and all that. Um, and yeah, McDonald was able to score like some really impressive interviews, partially because they're bi or multilingual. They speak they speak English and Japanese. So to just access in a way that we don't get in a lot of other journalism about Nintendo, and it plays around with what makes Nintendo a little bit unique. And them chasing instead of necessarily the technological prowess, but just fun. And how they go about doing that. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. So Super Nintendo, Case of McDonald's.
I should really read more nonfiction.
Mm.
I feel like there's so much that can be learned, but I prefer to read fiction. But I love when I get to hear from you and other people just how many cool nonfiction things there are out there.
Yeah, and sometimes it's nice. I also just got through the wonderful interlibrary loan, a book called Baseball in the Garden of Eden, which is about like the mythical and mythicizing baseball history about the
Hmm.
how this whole myth around Abner Doubleday in the Civil War inventing baseball and the alternative histories and what it says about the sport in terms of them trying to pick and select ones, and that one's pretty good. um
Hmm.
yeah, and I was like, I recommend having like a fiction book and a nonfiction book that you're reading at the same time, just because sometimes your brain wants the escape, sometimes your brain wants, just to learn more about your special interest.
Hmm.
But yeah. Um,
Does Tungsten Arm O'Doyle make an appearance in this book?
I'm early on, so I can one can only hope. Yeah. But we're going a little bit different direction for this month's show. We're headed to space because we're going to be
Yes.
talking about Project Hail Mary, the book and the movie. But before we dive into that and Andy Weir's kind of bibliography, we thought we would chat just about some of our just general favorite space fiction. So what's some intergalactic stories that you have enjoyed?
Um, man, just thinking book wise, I think in the last episode I briefly talked about this visual novel titled On a Sunbeam.
Right.
Um, that's something that's really stuck with me. It's gorgeous. It's really well written. Um, it's a full cast of women in the book.
Mm,
On a Sunbeam is something that I highly would recommend. Just thinking about other space fiction in general throughout all of media. Um, I recently covered playing Blue from Cowboy Bebop, which is the very final song that you hear in the entire series. I'm not going to tell you what's
yeah,
happening.
because you have pitched that idea.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
maybe.
it's a very emotional moment when that song is playing.
Mm,
The entire soundtrack for the show is great, but it's really interesting. When I think about Cowboy Bebop, I watched it and Trigun basically in the exact same summer before I moved across the country. So they live together in my mind, and I always talk about how Cowboy Bebop is a space western because they're flying around, they're bounty hunters, they're going from planet to planet,
yeah.
and Trigun, which is a western in space because it's set in a desert
Mm.
on a planet with a whole lot of space technology. And they're two very poignant stories that go in different directions, but very well told. And that's what I think about when I think of space media.
Yeah, I don't necessarily read a lot of space media. Like, Cosmic X-Men is my least favorite X-Men, you know? Um, I like some quirky space fiction, like weird Kurt Vonnegut stories. There's a series of short stories by Italo Calvino called Cosmicomics, which take these like neat scientific principles and then just build stories around it. Like there's a love triangle story of three people that are falling through space in like parallel lines. And so they're never actually going to intersect, but they're like all jockeying for the girl in the middle and all that. So Cosmic Comics is fun. Um, I do love, I guess it would qualify, and we've talked about it before, but the Murderbot series of books. Um, Yay, autism. The great character for that. Uh, and then I think the closest to today's topic would be Neil Stevenson has a couple space stories. Anathem, which is that's a wild one, and that's like almost this like monks in space. But the closer one would be Seven Eves. And that one's got that kind of a hard sci-fi of just like half compelling story, half fun info dumps. Um, and then, yeah, the other one was just you, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but introduced me to Andy Weir. I want to say back in the day. And I've enjoyed what I've read from him. So tell me first, because I don't quite know your history. What's your background with Andy Weir?
My background with Andy Weir is that The Martian was popular and I bought it and I tore through it.
Mm,
And then my dad wanted to read it and now he has it from me. And that was forever ago when the book came out, about what, 10 years ago or
yeah, I think
so.
2014, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny to me because I have a personal beef with the movie. Um, Mainly for one
And
reason.
quick pause. We're going to be talking about personal beef later. That is a
That's
little hint some night I had forgotten from the book, but we're coming back to personal beef. Go on.
Yeah. Um, let's see. So for The Martian,
Mm,
right? There is one point in the book very early on. I'm going to pull up my review of this. On Sol 11, Mark Watney wondered how the Cubs were doing. And of course, that was a great hook for me for that book. And
yeah.
so I really enjoyed reading The Martian. And then of course it's just like this guy made this cult classic sci-fi book. What's he gonna do next? And then Artemis comes out, which is completely different from The Martian.
Mm,
And I will say, I think I told you this after we went to go see the movie. I
yep.
think that's one of my favorites of his, mainly because it's the most different. And it's this thriller, this intrigue story that's set on a colony on the moon, hence the name Artemis. And it's really interesting how it's told. And, it's one of those other things where like the main character is in a civilization, so they have multiple other people to talk to, which is different from The Martian and
Yeah.
Project Hail Mary.
0 or 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's plural.
Yeah, so it shows like you see in The Martian and in Project Hail Mary that he's very good at writing dialogue.
Yeah.
But it really shines in Artemis, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got to and then when did you read, let's finish up the trilogy. He has some short fiction, all those, but in terms of longer pieces, then what about Project Hail Mary?
Basically when it came out and when I could get my hands on it. Because again, it was so popular. Shout out to the library system here, able to provide me with a copy, and it was another book that I just tore my way through. And as we're going to get into in the movie, I love how the movie stuck to the way the book was written and the way that it progressed the story.
Yeah, and we're this first part spoiler free. We'll give you a cue when we're going to kind of switch into spoilers. But yeah, I read, because I was going through my log, and I read The Martian in 2015. I think the movie came out in 2015 as well. Both The Martian and Project Hail Mary, you have the movie rights getting picked up very soon, maybe even before the book is published, which is kind of fascinating. Though actually, I should pause and say that The Martian, so Andy Weir was like a programmer, worked for Blizzard, which I didn't realize until prepping for this. And he just kind of wrote on the side, and he had a website, and The Martian was like a free series that he just put on his website, and people convinced him to self-publish on Kindle for like $1. And then it kind of took off. And then from there, it got traditionally published around the same time that the movie was kind of kicked into to gear. So I read that one around the time right before I think the movie came out. I did not read Artemis, but you're convincing me maybe to give it a shot. And then, yeah, I read Project Hail Mary. I feel like you read it right when it was published and told me to read it. That's my memory. But I read that 2021. It was published in 2021. And describe for our dear listeners how you summed up Project Hail Mary, your tagline for it.
It's The Martian in space. The Martian on a spaceship.
Yeah. Which it is. It's great. So yeah, I mean, I heartily recommend the two books that I read. It sounds like you heartily recommend The Martian and Project Hail Mary as kind of a pair, and the Artemis as a more standard kind of space opera kind of story. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a standalone thing. It's a fun adventure.
Yeah. And I think we can speak kind of vaguely before we pause. But we both would recommend seeing Project Hail Mary. And I would say on the biggest screen that you can find.
We sure did.
Yeah, we saw it at the IMAX in Raleigh, and giant screen.
Not just the IMAX in Raleigh, the largest IMAX screen in the entire state of North Carolina.
Yes.
Which, as it tells you before the movie starts, is larger than a tennis court.
Yeah. Their little preamble at the beginning is wonderful. And yeah, it's, there's something about seeing movies in theaters, and this one in particular, there was some beautiful cinematography in it that benefits from the biggest screen that you can find. Anything else to say up front before we pause and talk in depth?
I would definitely recommend, read the Andy Weir collection. He's got some really great stuff. I love just the fact that we're having this sci-fi resurgence. Personally, for me, science fiction is how I got into reading. I think about when I was in middle school reading Asimov and reading Ray Bradbury, because I had the Martian Chronicles assigned in school.
Yeah.
right? And it was just like, oh wow, this is really cool. And learning from there, reading that, and then going on to read Dandelion Wine and reading Fahrenheit 451 and
Mm,
things like that. Which of course,
yeah.
Fahrenheit is not really true like space fiction, but more dystopian fiction. But
Yeah.
reading the Martian Chronicles and Dandelion Wine and reading I, Robot because the movie was coming
Oh,
out,
yeah.
it really set me up as a reader. And so I'm really happy now that we're possibly going to get new people who are going to latch on to science fiction.
Yeah, well put. I think science fiction allows for some really pointed, like the whole Star Trek conversation, some really pointed views and analysis of our own world because it's close enough oftentimes to it, as opposed to like this fantasy world that's feels wholly different. So I think that you can kind of have conversations about, say, with Project Hail Mary, about cooperation instead of division and valuing expertise in some of those things in a way that is engaging and safe and hopefully gets the world to be a little bit of a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. So let's pause. Go, watch the movie and or read the book and then come back and we're going to dive into some spoilerific talk on Project Hail Mary. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back.
I have to interject real quick because I have to point out Portal 2, right? The video game.
Okay.
When you're doing the final fight, you're taking off all of these cores of this AI that is trying to kill you. And one of the cores is simply obsessed with space and talking about how much it wants to go to space and talks very fast, almost in the way that Rocky does. And there is just one voice line that it has where it shouts space very loud and very long. And after you said space at the beginning, my initial reaction was just to do that voice, and I'm very proud of myself that I didn't do it.
That for the outro, when we do the Jonathan, my good friend, thank you for talking. I want you to end with just space or however it is. I'm not.
Yes.
I haven't played Portal 2. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Was that meant to be as part of the show?
Yeah, this was part of the show.
Okay. Okay.
No,
Keeping it in. Good.
Yeah.
Less editing for me.
Yeah.
Future Spencer appreciates it. Anyways, so Project Hail Mary, written by Andy Weir, who we discussed, screenwriter Drew Goddard, who also adapted The Martian. And in fact, this movie would have come out like a year earlier, but he was wrapped up with some other projects and they really wanted to work with him again. Ryan Gosling actually purchased the manuscript before it was even published. And then he brought to Lord Miller, Phil Lord, Chris Miller, all of them together, putting together a really tremendous, moving, beautiful, silly movie.
Yeah. And just talking about how much Ryan Gosling believed in the book, I saw a little poll quote that he was at a screening over the weekend because we saw it release weekend.
Yep.
And he was talking about how, for the movie industry, it's our job to make things that we believe in.
Yeah.
To get you to come to the theater, and it's not supposed to be the other way around. It's like we're supposed to make great things for you to be excited about, and it's really cool just to see like how much he really believed in this, and it shows on the screen.
Yeah, it really, really came together nicely. You want to start with the story, the plot?
Yeah, I touched on this briefly in the first half. I did really enjoy the fact that they told this movie in the same way that the book is written. It starts on the ship and it progresses through a series of flashbacks as he figures out how he got on the ship in the first place. And I really like that they kept that in because I think that's a very poignant part of the experience of the book.
Yeah, and also, and I think there's going to be a recurring theme in this conversation. Really tough to do, tough to pull off. And there's a similar conversation with The Martian. That might be why they wanted to make sure that they had Goddard. That's something that works well in a book. Just like The Martian, it works well in the book. You can have someone reflecting. You can kind of have that, close up narration, those kind of things. That's hard to do in a movie when the first, chunk of it is just Gosling, by himself with a few of those flashbacks so you can have some interactions, you know? And that's, and these, we'll talk about performances later, but I think just Gosling's charisma and silliness helps to pull off that first. Because when did you say you had a time mark? When does Rocky show up?
Rocky shows up approximately 50 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, so you figure that first 50 minutes, anytime that you're on the ship, it's just him, and they're not doing the Martian trick of he's talking into like a camera. They actually do that later, in a delightful manner. So yeah, that's hard to pull off. It's also hard to pull off in terms of the story, just that infotainment. Info dumps work well in books because it is a book and you can kind of have these little sides that you can kind of scan and pay attention to or not. But that's harder to, I think, pull off in a movie, but they did it quite well. They had just enough. And there's a Weir interview that I listened to where he talked about he wanted to provide enough science so that you feel smart. But not so much so that it is exhausting or it's this barrier to entry. And he talked about he kind of learned from like watching House, and that if you give people like the problem and you give them the solution, you can kind of yada 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 a little bit and just drop in some terms for the middle how you get there, and people will be like, oh yeah, I'm smart because I kind of followed that. So I felt like they pulled off that that structure quite well, and just the right amount of science talk to make it feel like his book, but not so much so that it was hard to follow.
Not quite Michael Crichton teaching you how an MRI works.
No, not quite. And it was by and large pretty faithful to the book. Weir was a producer on this. I think that kind of helped. It was definitely pared down like any book, and this was a sizable one. Some of the flashbacks, you don't have as much time with the crew, which I think does detract a little bit from like their deaths. It doesn't hit quite as heavy there.
Right.
My favorite change, you mentioned personal beef. I had forgotten until reviewing that in the books, Rylan, how he survives with the Iridians come up with, cloning Rylan Grace hamburgers, essentially. So literally personal beef. It was probably wise to just chop that part off the movie.
Yeah. Also on beef, apparently, most people's favorite line was improvised. When Rocky was asking Grace if he had a mate, and he talks about how she's with Mark now, and Rocky just goes, Rocky hate Mark. Apparently that was an improvised line.
Yeah. And maybe that can be a good time to like kind of transition to Rocky. And also incredibly hard to do this character that you empathize with so strongly, that literally does not have a face, that all needs to be through the writing and through the body movement and through how it's created. And that's where I think it's key that they use by and large practical effects, and it's a puppet. For they talked
Puppet
about
of the year.
Yeah. And the lead puppeteer was James Ortiz, who was just doing a voice as essentially like a placeholder until they could get a big name. And they did get a big name in Meryl Streep for a line. But by and large, he did such a tremendous job that they kept him on. And I mean, I applaud I'm grateful that they did the puppet and the practical effects as opposed to CGI, because it felt much more real. And I think it gives a much more unintended grounded performance for then like Gosling to play off of. But it's cool, man. I was looking into it a little bit. A puppet, they have a person on each of the 5 or so legs, but then at other times when they couldn't quite do that, it'd be animatronic, but it'd be linked to a puppet like off stage that they would do. They would sometimes have Ortiz in a giant hamster ball rolling around the script, the ship, which was all real. They actually built that ship and had like ceilings that could be removed so the puppeteers could be working above, or the floors removed so they could be below. Just all that, I think, made it feel much more lived in and engaging, and made the relationship between Rocky and Grace more compelling, because there was an actual thing there. There was the actual voice there. It's not just, speaking and then waiting for someone to pipe in Meryl Streep's voice later, Yeah. Yeah. Thoughts
Yeah, and
on Rocky for this?
I loved Rocky, and just with you talking about the importance and the effect of having an actual puppet there.
Yeah.
The scene where they're celebrating everything, and Ryan's got the party hat on. They put the hat
Yeah.
on the globe, and Rocky just rockets himself up to the top of the ball to be
Yeah.
like underneath the hat.
Oh,
And they're like, you can animate those things, but it works better if it's practical,
yeah, it does. And they, it is a, Weir is a funny writer, and you have, Lord and Miller, who, 21 Jump Street and Lego Movie,
Mhm.
and like they can make some funny movies. Gosling is a hilarious performer. Like, this is a funny movie, but it's a tightrope kind of thing where it's very silly, but it's not cartoonish. And the like pathos, they balance the pathos with the silliness as you're going through. Yeah.
The entire arc of getting him to the secret ship,
Mm.
um great humor in there of him just like being in a situation where he has no idea what's happening, especially the hard cuts in the entire jet sequence, the jump
Yeah.
cuts there, to him just like, I don't need this medicine, to him just literally throwing all the pills into his mouth in the jet. Just great. It's
Yeah.
so good, man.
Yeah, and maybe we can transition then to Gosling. Yeah, just that funny, sad, charming triumvirate. He just nails. This is a wonderful Gosling performance. I mean, he's great in almost everything that he's in. But yeah, I thought he was perfect for this.
And also Sandra Hüller as Eva
Yes.
Strat. Very, very straightforward, very no nonsense, very buttoned, very, I'm the person that's in charge of a group of people to save the world, and she plays her role very well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought her up, because yeah, I thought her performance was fantastic, because it is dry and pragmatic. There's a little bit of humor with that dry things, but there's just the right amount of like heart underneath it, with that idea of like her, and I forget the character's name, he's in the Beef, saying essentially like, no, you can do it, and we're not accepting anything less from it, coming from a
Mhm.
source of appreciation for him, but also love for the world. And I
Right.
feel like that character, um, if you play it too cold, then the big twist at the end that like, no, they just, chloroformed him in and dropped him on a ship.
Mhm.
Um, that doesn't work. But if she plays that character too warm, then it also doesn't work, because you're like,
Right.
no, she wouldn't actually make these choices. But she just, again, tightrope perfectly that cold and dry and pragmatic, but at the same time, you just get enough of a hint with her performance and how it's written, in the relationship between her and kind of Gosling, how they play those scenes, that yeah, you feel it. And yeah, she's great. Like in the book, she talks about, she's doing all these things, and it's like, yeah, I might end up in prison, but it's worth it, because this is the only way that essentially those students that you care about will have a future.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, her
Um,
her character is fantastic.
I was a little disappointed. I think too many people around us had read the book, because nobody was really that surprised when Grace gets tranquilized to go into the spaceship. So I'm like, yeah, this is the moment. This is the moment of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, no audible gasps on
Yeah,
the opening weekend. I think if we went this weekend, yeah, because it's
probably.
yeah, but that arc of like Weir, he was on what was it House of R through the Ringer, and he was talking about in The Martian. Oh, what's the main character's name? You have a good memory for this stuff. I'm curious if you got it.
That's Mark Watney.
Yeah, I knew you would. He was essentially an author insert character of not who Weir actually is, but who Weir wants to be, where he just dialed up all his best qualities and he just erased all his bad ones. But that Ryland Grace is not that, because Ryland Grace has this, um, he flees. He's afraid. He dabbled in academia, and it did. He hit. There was some tension when there was pushback with some of his beliefs, and then he fled to being a teacher, and not being a high school teacher, but being middle school, where no one's going to challenge him on those things. He can just be the cool, like Mr. Turner-esque teacher there, and throughout just that idea of like, he wants to, and other people see what he's capable of, but he does not think that he can. And what is the line that you just need someone to be brave for? And
Right.
turns out it's just like his little buddy. And we're 31 minutes in, and I think I use this for the title, but like, this is the good science friends.
Yeah.
Like him and Rocky, and that connection, and that beautiful, beautiful relationship. And each. When Rocky, when he talks about Adrian and how long have you been together? I forget what the number is. And then he says
138 years.
Yeah, but it's not enough. And then it says it's going to take him like 6 years or so to make it back home to Adrian, but to sacrifice years off of that, to add years to it, I should say, so that he can save Grace was just... Oh, that gets you. And then when that is returned, when Grace forsakes his world entirely to go and save Rocky, it's just, it's a beautiful balance and a beautiful story.
Yeah. I'm going to drill. I'm going to try to get to all three of the things here.
Mm-hmm.
One, on Grace as a teacher. I do love his character and how he wrote the big academic paper that was the end of his academic career about how everybody is wrong, and then you don't need water-based life forms to exist, which of course the astrophase ends up being a water-based life form.
But Rocky
is not.
Which played up more in the books. In the movie, I don't know if I would have necessarily connected the dots. Like, oh, he was right. They don't explicitly say it,
Right. Yeah. And just also the way that he is written as a teacher, with the students first asking him about the betrothal line, and he's like, I think that's something you should ask your parents about. And then
I've used that line.
And then he actually, like, because they won't stop, and he just diagrams everything, and all the students just freak out. It's like, well, okay, now how do I deal with this? But also, a joke that I feel like only the two of us laughed about, which I brought up to you, was when Rocky first comes aboard the ship and he's rolling around everywhere asking a million questions, and Grace just stops and he's like, Rocky, my hand is up.
Yeah, my hand is up. Yeah, teacher. And also just, and this was good in the book, just when he's like, why don't I swear? And he just has these ridiculous phrases they use instead, because yes, he's a middle school teacher and you can't be dropping the F-bombs. It's all like, what the fudge is going on? And those kind of things. Yeah. And great science teacher shirts too. I had potential.
I wear this shirt periodically.
At the bottom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
better win all the Oscars for for costume design.
Yeah. Also, it wasn't until I was watching the movie that I got the Rocky Adrian connection. Is because when you read a book, sometimes things just have names, right?
Yeah.
You don't read the joke, but then when you get to see the joke, you get the joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the last thing. Oh, on them being science buddies. Yeah, I love the way that um Rocky, as smart as he was able to immediately understand. Both of them understand that we have to figure out a way to understand each other
Yeah.
to make that happen, and that Rocky was able to teach Grace some things about what he needs to know out there, and Grace teaching Rocky about relativity and radiation was
Yeah, and yeah, and and not just for like, problem solution kind of you know, bottle show kind of thing like these stories kind of are, but just so that Rylan gives him information that he needs in order to properly grieve for the lost crew, you know? It's yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. Um and also it's just a beautifully shot movie. Some in terms of just them using that they built the actual ship. They're using those gyro things to like kind of move around film there. But then when you get outside the ship, the just space scenes are beautiful, especially when they go to that planet. I forget what it was, where the
Adrian.
asteroid is. Yeah, sorry, Adrian. Yeah, that shot was just the use of color, the score was fantastic, and the score was great too, just in terms that like at times they'd be using some like more kind of unique instruments to give that like worldly, this is not just an America story kind of thing. But then it at times, paying however much to get that Beatles song to us. But then at that Adrian scene, it just kind of soars and is dramatic and perfectly lines up with this sentiment there of just um the beauty and splendor and isolation and expansive space.
I almost cried
Mm.
when they got below the atmosphere and you could see the surface of the planet.
Oh yeah.
It's just like this is exactly what I want, you know? Um man, also again, on dialogue, I love Rocky looking at the monitor and saying this planet has a dumb name. It's just Tau Ceti plus E.
Oh, I would do anything for Rocky. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I think both those examples, like some of those kind of lines, that didn't come from the original book, and some of those shots that we see, I think speak to Lord and Miller's contributions because we haven't spoken as much about them. But you can kind of see the through line from, say, Spider-Verse, especially the second one, and the playing with animation and playing with color, and playing with contrasts. Um, it's showing up in certain scenes here. And then just the humor, finding ways to kind of get these lines in and deliver them, but also then chasing the pain, the pathos, the sadness with some of that just silliness. It's just beautifully balanced.
Yep. And we've touched on this briefly as it just being like one of the best. You can call it a throwaway gag, but just like so good. The Meryl Streep bit when they just they're spending all of this time and like they're on whatever timer. I'm gonna come back to this real quick because I have one more thought.
Okay.
But just like they spent all of that time just trying to figure out what voice Rocky
Yeah.
is supposed to have. Um, which was great. But yeah, so while I was thinking about this, one thing that kind of skipped over in the movie is just the fuel consumption rate.
Right.
Because like there's a whole moment where um he can't use the centrifuge because he doesn't have enough fuel to do it. And wasn't there a scene in the book where the centrifuge gets stuck when it's trying to deploy? Which I guess like they program in enough danger sequences in the movie and it's all
Yeah.
like one large danger sequence. But like, there's small moments in the book that are worth visiting.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was somewhat intentional to create some distance between this and The Martian. The
Mhm.
Martian is such a fun movie because it is constant problem solution, problem solution, problem
Right.
solution, and that gives it this propulsive energy. Um, Whereas this one, I feel like they took away or they pared down some of those problem solution, problem solution, problem solution, and elevated more because they have a relationship in this that you don't have as much in The Martian, where it's him talking to himself, and sending those
Yeah.
video logs back. Yeah.
On problem solution, I finally get to share one of the things that I held myself back from sharing on Sunday. Um,
Okay.
Completely enjoy, and this is not a dig, but I completely enjoy the fact that the solution for everything in this movie and also book is the exact same solution that humans have had all of the time through all of history. And we learn that it rarely ever works. We have a problem with an invasive species. What do? We go and we get the predator. And now within the Lake Michigan and Illinois River ecosystem, we have flying carp.
The old, there's a rat, send in a cat. Now there's the cat, send in the dog, and all those kind of things. Yeah, that's
Yes.
that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah, you got to save some for the sequel, though. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we have fish that jump out the water and slap you in the face.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
But I think, did you want to say more about Meryl Streep? Was that
No.
okay?
I was gonna come back around to the fuel thing for
Okay.
that. One more thing that I was thinking about, one more gag, and I'm just gonna tie into something visual that I enjoyed in the movie. Um, Rocky's ship is the pocket dimension in Interstellar.
Yeah,
Because it's
those vertical
just the way
lines
that it looks.
stretching and stretching. Yeah,
Yeah,
we didn't even talk about Well, yeah, we were talking about books, right? Right.
yeah.
Interstellar's fun. Yeah.
But one thing that I was thinking about, I don't know if this was intentional visually, which it probably was. But the way that Grace set himself up to navigate the ship with all of the bungee lines
Cool.
kind of mirrored the way that we saw Rocky's ship later on. And I thought that was
Ooh.
really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the line that's been. Did you have any other closing thoughts? I had one more. The line that's been really sticking with me and kind of circulating was, and I'm not going to get this quite right because I didn't record it, but when Strat is talking to Grace, trying to convince him to go, and she says essentially like, "We got 30 years, and that's if countries collaborate and share food, which they won't." Um, but then the movie is about two figures that have no reason, it seems like they would be set against to fear each other. But they collaborate against all odds. That first time that Rhinelander takes off that helmet, which I forget what he says, it's a great line, taking a big chance or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that is
If I'm wrong, I'm really wrong.
that's it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that, I don't know, I just needed, like I've heard described, I think dismissively as hope core, but no, we need some hope core, like this. Unlike sending in a bigger predator, like the solution to our problems is pretty simple. Just don't
Yeah.
be a dick and look out for each other.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to have a story that reminds us, like, yeah, that's it. That's all we need. We can solve all these things if we just, take off the helmet.
Yeah. Hopium is also one of my favorite words.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So
I think in the book, doesn't Grace get a statue at the end on Earth?
I don't remember. I don't recall end scenes on Earth because I haven't read it since that first one. I went back and forth on whether I wanted to reread it before for this. But to be honest, I've just gotten pulled into the Mistborn books. I don't remember if they give you a glimpse of what's going on at Earth at the end there, or if you just stick with the personal beef on Iridian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, as I mentioned to you, like I really, again, spoiler, you're in the second half of the episode. Um, I would have really wanted them to have given him his little keyboard thing that he
Mm,
used to communicate with the Iridians in that he has in the book. Because it's
yeah.
just like I guess they just learn English, but I really did appreciate that Grace learned how to communicate with sounds
Yeah,
when
that was
he
cool.
got to teach them.
Yeah, they show him doing something on a computer that's setting up like the translator, but that was an example of just that empathy that both people, meeting the middle and respecting each other's cultures. Um, yeah, yeah. Okay. So it's Project Hail Mary. Wonderful movie, wonderful book. What do we have next month?
We are talking about the boys of summer, and we're not
Mhm.
in the majors. We're not even in the minors with
No.
Bull Durham.
Yep.
We're going to the Sandlot, and we're
Mhm.
going to watch a modern classic film
Mm.
came out last year titled Ethos.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been itching to watch this one since it came out. Yeah. So yeah, some baseball talk in April. Very fitting. Um, yeah, theme music by Practical Dinosaur, which we talked about in the last episode. So check that out. We'll have a link in the show notes with the leading you to the recently released EP. Is it EP or LP? I always get
It's
those
an
mixed up.
EP. Yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah, I shouldn't have doubted myself. So please check that out. Highly, highly recommend. And Jonathan, my good friend, thank you for talking about some good science with me this month.
Yes, I love it. I love when we get a chance to talk about space.